that anybody who's not here or wants to come to the next one, but isn't able to come to this one, they can watch this one and catch up. So great to see y'all this afternoon for our study of Revelation, Challenging Political Lordship, Divinity, and Allegiance. This is something I've put together the past couple months, trying to put together a resource that's hopefully helpful for y'all when it comes to tackling Revelation. I think Revelation is probably one of the most difficult books in the Bible to read and understand. Would y'all probably agree based on reading it? Yeah, it's one of those books that is just filled with so much stuff that it feels like you don't know where to start or what to do with it. And so today, I wanted us to kind of start to unpack that together, to kind of get into the nitty-gritty details of what is going on in the actual historical picture of where Revelation is being written, of the time period that it's in, the historical context of Revelation, because I think that's really important. When we read the Gospels, oftentimes we look at the historical aspects to tell us about why Jesus is saying something or why Jesus is doing something, because it relates somehow to the culture as well as the Hebrew culture as well. And I think especially for Revelation, that is just as much true. So for our study, we are going to, I'm going to share this screen with the Zoom people so they can see it as well. Hopefully they're seeing that. There's nobody on Zoom, but it's for our recording. Anyways, this is kind of where we're going to be going through. We're going to talk about our experiences with Revelation, just personal testimonies from each other. And then we're going to walk through the historical context of when John is writing this piece of scripture and how that is important to why he's writing it. What is he writing it for? Next week, we'll look at Revelation as a multifaceted piece of work. Revelation is not just prophecy. It is not just letter. It is not just trying to think of the other two. There's two other ones that I'm not recalling right now because I haven't prepared for those this week. There's for next week. We'll look at how it's so many different things bundled up into one, how it's almost a hybrid of all these different models that came before it and are now given to us today. And then we'll look at Revelation and the symbols and imagery in it. We'll look at the significance of numbers. And then we'll finish up for the fourth week talking about how we interpret Revelation for today. What is helpful for us in interpreting this scripture today and how we might use it, because I think that's important. Scripture is not just something that we're going to read, get a lesson out of and not do anything with it. I think it's always good that we take time to apply it to what we're living through today. And so I'm excited for that. But the first thing I wanted to do for us is start off with what is your own experience with Revelation? What have been your experiences, whether they're positive or negative or maybe neutral, with this book of the Bible? Maybe what has been the role in churches that you've been in, whether it's here or somewhere else, and what that meant for your church. And the final question is, can anything good come out of Revelation? So I'd like to start with what y'all say about it before I say anything about it. So what have been your experiences with Revelation?
I was always a little afraid to dig into it.
Yeah. Yeah. Kind of being afraid to even get into it. Yeah. Scary. I'll leave that with afraid. Scary, afraid, all that stuff. What else?
Experiences. I remember some professor from Duke coming to Bethany and doing a study or presentation on Revelation. And I remember sitting in the fellowship hall over when that took place. And I can't for the life of me think of the guy's name. Barry? It wasn't you. No, not. You can breathe now.
How long ago was that, Dave?
It was many years ago.
Decades.
Writer, very prolific. He's just Luke's the guy that writes everything over there. He even reads his own stuff.
Will Willimon?
Huh?
Willamette?
Who?
Will Willimon.
Yeah, Will Willimon.
Yeah. Willamon.
Yeah, wasn't he the one that came out and did the presentation?
Or would have been Richard Hayes, because he was big into
No, it
Duke
wasn't,
back
that
then.
wasn't Barbara's son. I'm sorry. I think it was Will Willimon
Okay.
that did it. That was the last time. And I've never really done a deep dive into that book. I've
Yeah.
never really got into all the symbolism and stuff.
Sure.
It was a little scary.
Understandable. Yeah. I'll say it's been a while.
It's been a while.
I remember too, someone did a study on Revelation, we attended, and I left there with a positive attitude. I didn't feel still afraid of it.
Didn't the Sunday school do it one time?
It might have been a Sunday school, I don't know who did it or who led it, but I did go out of there with a more positive outlook, that not to be afraid of it.
A lot of people know about it from the Left Behind series, which is,
Ah,
that's what I was gonna say.
Yeah.
I read that with my son, the children's version, the Left Behind series. I have.
My Bible says it's about hope and a warning.
hope and a warning. I'd say so. Yeah.
It's kind of written apocalyptically.
There you go. Ooh, I like that.
Spell that.
Apocalyptic.
You know,
Elite.
still that cool?
Oh yeah. I've done a lot of stuff in it. So. And that's a word that pops up, apocalyptic.
Yeah.
Mhm. Well, when y'all think about apocalyptic, what do y'all think?
End times.
At times, yeah.
Future.
Future, yeah.
End of time.
Yeah,
End of time, yeah.
all kind of crazy things happening.
Crazy things happening. Yeah, I'm gonna write that down. Crazy things happening. Yeah.
A lot of evil.
Yeah, a lot of evil. That is important for John. What other experiences? Anything else? I think it's a good list. Yeah, I would say, and maybe just go along with afraid, avoidance. Kind of like Dan said, like last time I remember was decades ago that we talked about this, or a Bible study way long ago, or a couple years ago, a few years ago.
It's read a lot in funerals.
Oh yeah, definitely. And which part of that is read at funerals? The one with the dragon? Is that right? During
Well, there's a new heaven and
Yes.
new earth, and I'm the Alpha and Omega. and
Yep.
I'm supposed to.
Yep, very classic. That's probably the only time you'd probably hear it read outside of anything else, really.
And I just read something about back to Eden, that it was kind of like going back to, not maybe back to Eden, but to a future Eden,
Mhm.
being with God. New heaven, new earth, new life, new earth.
I'll say New Eden. How about that?
Mhm.
Yeah, if I can spell it right. Only 4 letters.
And people still call it Revelations.
Thank you,
Sure.
man. Reva. I can't even spell it right. No, I got it right.
You got it.
Yeah,
Just write no S.
Shuns. People, ever since studying this thing, and every time I hear somebody say Revelations, it's like, it's just one. The revelation of Jesus Christ, from John. So, yeah, no, I think y'all are all around the ball, and everybody, and I'm glad we kind of just shared this, that everybody kind of has these similar feelings of like, yeah, this is something to avoid. This is something that just feels like a lot to dig into. I'm afraid of it because it's just very, it's very good versus evil. And there's a lot of evil throughout, this, but that's kind of where I wanted us to start. Hey, Ann, I see that you've joined us online. Are you able to see the PowerPoint at this time, Ann? I don't know if you can respond to me. or if you can hear me. Hopefully you can. I hope she can see.
It's too far back.
It's too far back?
Hmm.
Okay. Gotcha. Can you see the PowerPoint that's on the screen?
I just see white and some letters on it, but I can't make it out.
Okay.
Okay, that's better. That's better.
Yeah. Okay.
Just a minute.
Let me do this. We're no longer going to use the whiteboard. Can you see that screen? It says, what is your experience? And it's a slideshow. Can you see that, Ian? I hope so. I'm gonna just trust that you can. All right, so thank y'all for sharing those experiences that y'all have had. I want us to kind of move into the historical context of, when John is writing this piece of literature and kind of some things that lead up to when he's writing this. I think it's important for us when we look at some of these passages to understand, okay, he's not just writing this in a bubble. Right? This isn't just out of the blue. He is just suddenly writing this, but there's things that are happening in his community, in the places that he is serving or has served, that he thinks there's a need for this letter. He thinks there is something important to come out of it for the context that he is in. And so the context that we have here is the Roman Empire. John is somebody who has been in churches in the part of Asia during this time of the Roman Empire. This is the point of the Roman Empire when it is the biggest that it's going to be in 117 AD. And yes, sir.
Can you ask Ann to mute?
Yeah, I just muted her. So this is the biggest part of when the Roman Empire is coming into being. That's around 117 where it has the greatest extent. The part that that would probably not be part of the Roman Empire when John is writing, we think around the 90 CE, according to most scholars, is that some parts over here are not taken, and then there's some wars in Armenia and other stuff like that. But everything else is mostly the same going into when John is writing this passage. And so I want us to cover a few different things. First, to understand that John is likely writing during the reign of Emperor Domitian, around the 90s or so, not the 1990s, but the 090s. And we'll talk about the Pax Romana, kind of the motto of the Roman Empire. Then we'll talk about what worship means for Romans, along with its piety. We'll talk about persecution of Christians and what myths there are about a widespread Christian persecution. And then we'll talk about martyrdom in the early church. So we have a lot to get through. So let's hop into it. First thing I want to start off with is this idea of the Pax Romana. The whole point of the Roman Empire is peace, which is what Pax means, right? Peace. And their goal is to bring about this peace. During this period, the Roman Empire sought it throughout all its land, and peace was the end goal, no matter how you got that peace. It was mostly a way to do it through dominance, conquest, control, and that's how we get peace, because our way is the best way. Julius Caesar was kind of one of the first to start to really push some of this during the Roman Republic era. And he showed a lot of force during the Gallic Wars, conquesting those who would be under imperial rule, to force their peace onto the societies that they go into. In Plutarch's Life of Caesar, he attributes the saying of this to Julius Caesar, which is Vini, Vidi, Vici, which means I came, I saw, and I conquered. Whatever Julius Caesar saw, it was going to be his, no matter what happened. And as you can see kind of in this picture, he's holding the globe in his hand, and he's trampling over the people in order to conquer their territory. You can see almost like the Grim Reaper is working for him, like he has control over the gods in this case, and you have a band of people worshiping him behind him, following along, also enslaved to him. This is what Caesar wanted. This is what Julius Caesar wanted was to control, wanted to dominate, wants to share his way with people. It was a part of his politic. But the end result was peace. And this peace was established by force. And we see throughout whatever you look at, it was going to be the Roman way. One of the most important, or one figure that you can think about in Roman mythology is this idea of the palm branch or the palm tree. We have important meaning for the palm branch, right? Why? Why is the palm branch important to us?
Palm Sunday.
Yeah, on Palm Sunday, Jesus is coming into Jerusalem, and they're waving the palm branches for him, saying he's the King of the Jews coming in, right? The same is kind of it was a Roman or Greek symbol for victory. And legend has it that when Julius Caesar secured his sole power after the victory at Pharsalus, a palm tree suddenly grew up and sprung up at the temple of Nike, which is the Greek counterpart for the Roman goddess Victoria, or victory, right? And later that became known as Caesarea in Asia Minor. And so there's this mythology that goes along with this of these symbols that mean something. And when you go to look at the togas, they were based on the palm branch because togas were a sign of peace. You took off the armor, you put on your toga, which looked like a palm branch in some capacity. And it meant that we had won, that we are the victors, and that you are under our foot. And so we have those Adventus ceremonies, which we learned about in Advent, when the king processes through the town and people celebrate and have fun. That would have been what the emperor was dressed in. Julius Caesar was soon to become the one who started the emperor processes. He was somebody who was born into a privileged household, a patrician family in the ruling class. And when Sulla died, who was ruling before him, Julius Caesar returned to Rome after he'd gotten kicked out and worked his way up the ladder. He was a powerful speaker, a passionate public speaker, and he was called into military service, had many a victory, and soon began to work his way up in the political ladder, both in Rome and in the army. He was a person who knew how to speak people in a way that was coercing them into believing him. He was very much a rhetorician. And at some point, he got to the point of becoming a chief priest in Rome, and he gained sway with rich rulers, and he was able to get backed by them financially to help pay for his military successes throughout the continent. The people loved Julius Caesar. They thought he was the best thing since sliced bread. People had the best image of him because victory after victory means wealth after wealth. It means everybody knows that Rome is on top. People wanted him to rule. And in that time, you had consul chairs, which were kind of like the president for us. Like they were the executive kind of people. And there were 2 chairs for that. And so Caesar was like, I would love one of those chairs. And if it were up to the people, they say, you can just take the chair yourself. But that's not how it worked. So he got elected with a partner, but he decided to just ignore the partner who came along in his consulcy, and eventually kind of pushed them out of the ruling class. And there was a political opponent who said this is wrong, named Cato, and Caesar decided to have him arrested and thrown in jail. And another senator stood up when he saw that, and he said, I'd rather be in jail than be in the Senate with Caesar. So he walked with them to jail.
Okay.
And so he had pushed out his consulate chair, and Caesar began to conquer territory after territory. Tens of thousands numbered his armies, legions of soldiers, and after much conquest, Pompey tried to subvert his power, calling Caesar to disband his army. Mark Antony was put over Rome while Caesar went to go kill Pompey. And he helped Cleopatra in that midst to gain and claim the pharaohship in Egypt. And that was a way for him to get at Pompey. Caesar was a dictator for 10 years as an autocrat. Political opponents were ignored or killed. He killed a lot of senators who might have conspired against him, put down riots started by people. And even at that point, when Caesar was assassinated and killed, people were angry. Roman people were upset that they would kill such a powerful, strong leader for Rome. And that's when a vacuum of power was created. Any questions about Julius Caesar? He's kind of an important part to the Senate and the Republic of the Roman Empire, or Roman Republic dying, and making way for Caesars to come after, to have pretty much dictators afterwards.
You're talking about, when you were first talking about, you think power, you go in and you basically kill and overtake people for peace, but in that our symbol now with the eagle, he's got weapons and arrows in one hand and an olive branch or an olive, branch in the other. So we're still doing it kind of.
It's a human condition, Yeah. we want things our way, and we'll get them our way, because we think our way is the best way. Comes out of a place of fear as well. I think people want things to look uniform and unified, and that's what Caesar was promising for the people of the empire. Was we can spread our goodness throughout the entire earth. So let's bring Roman peace to everybody. And it's one of the greatest empires in all of human civilizations. Anything else on Julius Caesar before we move on? It's just important to remember kind of this history before we move on. So I wanted us to kind of look at what it means for the people during this time. Something really important for, hold on, let me make sure I'm not going to repeat myself. Okay. Don't want to repeat myself. So I will move that back over here. So we'll move on to empires after that. I think it's important for us to understand this. So we learned about Julius Caesar, and that led the way for his son Augustus, or Octavian. Grandson, sorry. But Julius made Octavian a powerful administrator while, and when I say Octavian, I mean Augustus. They're the same person. Augustus is just the title that he was given after he became Emperor Caesar. But Octavian was given kind of that power from Julius. And so when he was asked by the Senate to go kill one of somebody who was betraying the Roman Empire, according to the Senate, Mark Antony, for resistance, Octavian was the one called on. And so Octavian went out there to go kill Mark Antony. And instead of killing Mark, he decided to have a meeting with Mark Antony to talk things out instead of trying to, go to war with each other. And in that meeting, him, Octavian, Antony, and Marcus Lepidus, who was Caesar's loyalist, met for 2 days. And they created a three-way alliance between the three of them to help rule over Rome. And this was called the Second Triumvirate. The first one was with Julius Caesar and some of his accomplices. This is now the second one with these three. And they would rule over Rome for 13 years. And their goal would be tracking down people who killed Caesar. That was their whole point. That was their cover to have power, was to say, we're just going to hunt down conspirators against Julius Caesar and kill him. And that was the goal. And the Senate allowed it to happen. And for a decade, they had this new power. But after that decade, Octavian wanted the throne for himself. And so he continued to gain support from the Senate and from the people, sharing propaganda about Mark Antony's cohorting with the Egyptians. And they actually found the will of Mark Antony, or went into the place where the wills were stored. And he saw that Mark Antony had promised all of Rome to Cleopatra if he died. And that was a big no-no in the Roman Republic. They were very upset about that. And the people heard about that. They just said, this guy's a traitor, giving our whole land to Cleopatra, a queen of Egypt. This is crazy. And so he declared war on Antony and went there to kill him. Very common during this time is that when powerful people were at the brink of being killed or something was going to happen to them, maybe tortured, they just killed themselves. This was just very common practice. So Mark Antony killed himself before Octavian could get there to kill him. Cleopatra did the same thing. He was planning on parading her through the streets, humiliating her, but she killed herself. And so Octavian became unopposed to power because the other guy, he said, can you just take a lower position? The guy said, okay. Egypt became his possession after this war. And then he became ruler of Gaul, Hispania, Syria, and these were all part of his own private empire, pretty much, within the Roman Republic. So he had almost more land than Rome itself under his name. And so then he began a quest to kill off any loyalists to Mark Antony in all the regions. And in 27 BC, Octavian said, I think I'm done with the public forum. I think I'm going to retire and, just hit the hay for this one. Except the Senate said, please don't do that. You will destroy the Roman Republic if you step out of power. You'll create a vacuum. This will not be good. So they called him Augustus, which means the revered one. And that's the first time that we would see kind of the Roman Republic start to change. Augustus got sick for the next 3 years. There was something wrong with him where he would just have bouts of sickness and then come back, bouts of sickness and then come back. But the Senate made him sole ruler. No, actually, Augustus asked the Senate to hand over all their power to him. And they said, okay. And they gave up all their power, and the Roman Republic was dead by 23 BC. And during this time, Roman bureaucracy was just not doing well because the Senate had just mismanagement. People had mismanagement. There was bribery that was rampant. Private tax system was used for extortion. Official positions changed yearly, which meant politicians were focused on themselves rather than their citizens. They were all about getting the money rather than helping out the people who were everyday normal people.
Go ahead, change.
You're starting to see kind of some similarities. And Augustus decided to throw out this system, create a merit-based system for chosen civilian servants. So instead of having a ruling class, anybody could be a part of the ruling class if they worked hard enough for it. He took tax collections. He decided to make the fire and police department a part of the state. He upgraded the infrastructure, new roads, standing navies, and patrol to manage roads. The government was old and dysfunctional, and so Augustus was the person, Octavian Augustus, whatever you want to say, slapped everything kind of into shape and got it working because it wasn't working before. And the army was the fighting force. It was a huge part. It was paid by the state. Instead of it being generals who paid their soldiers, it was the state who paid them. It was the taxes that paid for them. So they were allied with Rome, not their generals. There wasn't a lot of infighting and civil wars. It was actually very helpful for the empire to kind of be shipped and steered by one person. Even so, there were some things that people didn't like. They didn't like Augustus's moral laws. He said if you were caught in adultery, it was a crime against the state. So that meant adulterers could be brought into court. If they were female, they could be killed. If they were male, they would just get a slap on the wrist. Augustus really tried to uphold marriage as the standard by making people who don't get married live a more difficult, harsh life. And at the same time, Augustus was a rabid adulterer himself, and went against that law. But he's Caesar. Started a pointless war in Germania, and wanted a new heir to success him. Unfortunately, every single heir died who was going to come after him. And so one of his sons, Tiberius, who hated him, he convinced him to come back to Rome. And Tiberius decided that he could do it, maybe. At his funeral, he was deified as a god. And I wanted to just kind of say, this is how Caesar sees himself. He says, I found Rome a city of bricks and left it a city of marble. Very egotistical kind of guy. He thinks he is the greatest thing since sliced bread. But since Julius Caesar was deified when he died as well, Julius Caesar was considered the Divi Filius, which is the son of the deified one or the son of God. Does that sound familiar, right? For us as Christians. Again, there's some commentary here happening for Christians. I wanted to skip over a few emperors because I just thought it was important for us to get the first, couple things that led into the empire. And Nero is really important for the Christian movement as well, because we had, Jesus coming around doing ministry in the 30s, right? Dying and rising from the dead. And the next few decades is that expansion of Christianity, right? Paul traveling around, all the 12 disciples traveling around, spreading the word about Christ. And so when you get to Nero, you actually have a pretty decent amount of Christians that are hanging out in the Roman Empire. And so Nero is kind of an important figure for us. His mother is the one who got him to power. Her name was Julia Agrippina. She married the Emperor Claudius and said he needed to adopt Nero. And commentators would say that Nero was a brat, a liar, and he was cruel. So you can only imagine how great of an emperor he was. His mother forced him to marry somebody he didn't want to, Claudius's daughter, Claudia. And by the age of 16, after Claudius was maybe killed by Agrippina, Nero came to power as a 16-year-old boy. Would anybody love to be Caesar? The Roman Empire at 16, an emotionally unstable boy. Kind of turned the empire into a place where he could fill out his darkest desires. And so when Nero finally got to power, because of his mother, he said, I don't really need you anymore. So he started to push her out of power. His mother started to go towards Claudius's son to see if she could get him to come into power in front of Nero. And Nero really didn't like that. So he poked a hole in her ship and sent her out to sea. And she survived, swam to shore. And then his guard went out there and stabbed her. Legend has it that when she was being killed, she said, stab me there. And she was pointing at her womb, where the monster has been nurtured. Talking about Nero. Yeah. But prior to when he actually did kill his mother, he really wanted to reform the corruption that was happening in the Senate, to crack down on it. He slashed taxes for people. He banned capital punishment, granted slaves more rights, banned animal blood sports, and tried to actually phase out gladiatorial combat, trying to replace it with Greek wrestling instead. So this young boy did want some good things to happen in some capacity, but that young nature wasn't always the good thing. Many beloved Nero. He was a person of the common folk. He loved them. The elite hated him. So if you look back at writings by the elites, they look very negatively at Nero, but the commoner really thought he had a good public presence. But Nero, he really didn't want to be emperor. He wanted to be an artist. He wanted to be part of plays and musicals and other things like that. And so he decided with a lot of his time that he was going to spend a lot of it partying, going to brothels, hanging out with actors, which are considered lowlifes in Rome, getting drunk, acting in plays, yada, yada, yada. He was not the most responsible emperor. Romans actually believed that artists were actually lower in class than sex workers. So they saw artists as like the bottom of the barrel, and that's what your emperor was doing. He was being an artist.
Gosh.
He divorced his wife and killed her. Said and told the people.
Was he a good artist?
No. But he said when he killed his wife, who was beloved by the people, he said it was suicide. Nobody really believed him. He said that about his mother as well. But people didn't like that he lied about that. Around 64, he was not looking great in popularity. And he started to do some really bad things because one of the guards the Praetorian guards who kept him in check as a boy, saying, "That's not a good idea. You probably shouldn't do that. You're the emperor. You probably should not do that." He died. And the next Praetorian guard who would accompany him just kind of said, "Do whatever you want." Yes. So lots of orgies, bloody purges of the elites. He didn't care who he killed. He just killed them. And really didn't give a care about what he was doing in office. Around 64, that same year, on July 18th, Rome was a bunch of wooden shacks and a fire started and continued for about a week. By the end of the burn, 3 districts were completely destroyed and the imperial palace was damaged. And Nero said, "Well, I'll just build it better. It's fine." He was actually not in Rome at this time, and people were kind of ticked off that their emperor was not there while it was burning. But he said, "You know what? We'll make the streets wider so that, if there's another fire, we won't have this problem again." But he also said, "I'm going to put up a 120-foot statue of myself in the palace." So rumors began to spread that he started the fire in order to build up his palace how he liked it as an excuse. And so he got really nervous about these rumors and decided to put the blame on a really small Jewish sect of people called Christians. Yeah. And these Christians in Rome were composed of non-citizens, refugees, and Greek speakers, outsiders, because Christians were people who came into Rome, right? They didn't come from Rome and start in Rome. They came in, or they were converted while they were there. So foreigners were a perfect target as a scapegoat for this burning. And so Nero decided to torture Christians excruciatingly until they confessed to starting the fires. Once he got his confession from some poor soul who was probably tortured in the most horrific way, he began to round up Christians and have them gruesomely executed. Christians were torn apart by animals. They were burned alive to illuminate his garden parties. This form of torture was cruel even by Roman standards. So people began whispering, saying, "This guy is going crazy. We need to get him out of here." But that was easier said than done.
So did he really, there's always been that saying that Nero fiddled
while
Rome burned.
But you just said he wasn't in Rome when Rome
No,
burned.
it was
Well, he could have fiddled somewhere else.
I guess it depends on what he was fiddling with.
Well, that's true too.
I don't know. But yes, going on to that, Nero, after that moment, started to bring back treasonous trials. There was a coup against him, 23 conspirators in the Senate, and he killed all of them, including killing philosopher Seneca. And then brought back treason trials to convict and execute people on a whim. If they were an enemy or he didn't like them, they were going to be executed.
He got rid of capital punishment.
Yeah, he got rid of it and then he brought it back just for his purposes. There's also a really bad story where Nero saw a 13-year-old boy who looked like his wife that he had killed. Oh, another strange thing. He had his wife stuffed and embalmed in a mausoleum. Again, this just shows how kind of crazy he went at the end. But he took a 13-year-old boy and kidnapped him, castrated him, and then forced him to dress up like his wife and marry him in a bizarre service. And Nero did very inappropriate things to that poor boy. Sometimes he acted in plays as his wife. Again, the reason I'm sharing some of these things is because I want to just kind of show the culture that is happening at this time and the people in power who are in positions of power and have the eyes of spectacle on them. To show why John might be writing some of these things, because it's just a reality of where they're at and what's going on. Nero wanted to fund more of his escapades. He wanted to keep doing his crazy life. And he sent taxes to the governor of Gaul. His name's Vindix, and Vindix was just like, "No, I'm not doing this. Like, I refuse to give you more money to do your stupidity." And he took up arms of rebellion against Nero and called on Spain's leader to help him out. And Spain's leader didn't want to help out, but because Vindex named him as a co-conspirator, Nero was like, okay, well, we'll go to war against both of y'all. But they never went to war. The Praetorian Guard, the Senate, everyone was in favor of the rebels, and he was killed. And that created a civil war, which that is the year of 4 emperors. Before we go on, any questions about Augustus and Nero? Important figures, especially thinking about the persecution of Christians here, and also the establishment of the Caesars. Any questions? Cool.
Sounded peaceful to me.
Yeah, no. Then you have the year of 4 emperors. It is what it says it is. In a year, you had about 4 emperors on the throne. It was a civil war throughout the region to try and take the throne. Ended up being Vespasian who took the throne, and that started the Flavian dynasty. He was a general who was actually the one who was suppressing the Jewish revolt in Judea. This was the person who helped start the war against the Jews in order to destroy the temple in 70. Again, that's an important event as well, the destruction of the temple. But he trusted the rest of the campaign to his son Titus, went back to Rome to take it over, and became the Caesar after 3 before him. During his sack of Judea, though, he had captured a Jewish historian named Josephus. You probably heard pastors talk about Josephus plenty. He was a Jewish historian, and that's where we get a lot of sources for a lot of our documents. He talks about Jesus in some ways. He talks about other figures. And so Josephus is kind of important. But Josephus said he had a vision that Vespasian was going to be the next emperor of Rome. So Vespasian is like, I'll keep you around. But he kind of prevented the Roman Empire from collapsing, which was really important. He encouraged rumors to spread about the omens and prophecies that spoke about how he was destined to be the emperor. He made use of writers and rewarded those who spoke very positively of him, and those who didn't, he punished, burning their works. Many of them were Stoics. He had them arrested or exiled. But his reign was mostly peaceful. He was a builder. He built the Temple of Jupiter, but he also built, importantly, the Colosseum. And we'll talk a little bit more about the Colosseum, but it's a place where people were rounded together to have fights, animal fights, everything in between. It was a deadly place to go, but it was spectacle. One important thing about Roman emperors is they wanted spectacle to distract people from the happenings that were going on. They'd throw money in the streets. They'd have these games in the Colosseum. They would do anything to make sure people thought they were the coolest people in the world. But it was a way just as propaganda to say, you know, here's something to look at. Here's something to entertain you because we really love you. Don't worry about everything else we're doing. He died of natural causes. He actually died with really bad spouts of diarrhea. So poor guy. Titus was his son. He ruled for a couple years, but he died quickly as well. But that was when he came to power. Mount Vesuvius erupted, one of the biggest, greatest disasters to happen in that area. So that was a lot of what Titus had to deal with. Not much else really went on with him. And now we come to Domitian. This is where we think that John was likely writing his letter of Revelation. Domitian was the son of Vespasian, the youngest son. Titus was his older brother. And probably when he first got into power, he gave himself this title, which is Dominus et Deus, which means master and God. So you can only imagine how John, a follower of Jesus Christ, felt about Domitian declaring that thing about himself. Domitian considered the Senate useless and an idea from a bygone era and just did not listen to them at all. That he would be the one to bring Rome into a glorious new age. Historians in the Senate hated him because of that stance. Yeah, they didn't like him at all. One thing also to remember about Domitian is that he had a son who died while he was really young, probably an infant. And that was his only son. And that'll be important in a couple weeks for us to remember. I'll remind you of it. But he was very strict on morals, forbade public theater as well as satire. He openly condemned high-ranking officials. He didn't really care what people thought about him. He thought there was a scandal, he was going to call it out. He focused a lot on building up Rome. The city had suffered 2 civil wars and a huge fire, so Domitian said, we need to make this grand. We need to refurnish a lot of these things. And so he finished the temple of Vespasian and Titus, his father and older brother, renovated the Colosseum, or was called the Flavian Amphitheater during that time, and renovated some of Rome's greatest structures, including the Circus Maximus and the Pantheon. And he built some amazing palace for himself, which emperors after him used, and they loved it. It was one of the greatest palaces for them. Renovated some other buildings as well. But Domitian was a big organizer of games, fights, races, where he was quoted as presided at the competition in half boots, clad in purple toga in the Greek fashion, and wearing upon his head a golden crown with figures of Jupiter, Juno, and Minerva, while by his side sat the priest of Jupiter in the colleges of Flavials, similarly dressed, except that their crown bore his image as well. So instead of, they bore his image because he was their god. Domitian loved throwing money out to people and through lavish banquets. He liked to please the people in order to establish a long reign. And he had 15 years, so it kind of worked. He tried to stay on people's good side, especially the soldiers and the common folk. There were 3 locus of support that you needed in order to be Caesar of the Roman Empire. One was the common folk. You needed the support of the people. One was the military. You needed the military to support you in what you were doing. The last was the Senate. You needed their support. You could probably let one go by. Most often Caesars didn't care about the Senate and then chose the other 2. If they had those, the Senate couldn't really do anything. That's what Domitian did. He went on a war path, fought some just pointless wars. He fought the Germanic tribes up north, won some battles and bragged about it, but there was many casualties. It was unnecessary. He abandoned the campaign in Britain and then looked to the kingdom of Dacia, which is kind of in the northeast region of the Roman Empire, and they got decimated by the Dacia kingdom. It was a humiliating war. It kept his soldiers from dispersing, and it ended years later. It was a complete humiliation of the Roman Empire. And after that war, Domitian never recovered. He became more cruel. He started executing more people, and he ended up getting stabbed by one of his advisors, and was killed after that. That was a lot. I wanted to stop and just see how y'all are feeling after all these things. It's a lot of information, but I think it just sets up so well what John's trying to do. Questions, concerns?
So what happened to the person who killed him, who stabbed him?
The Senate really agreed. Actually, the Senate went in there after him and stabbed him more. Because the guy didn't finish the job, so the Senate came in and too brutal.
So nothing happened to him. Okay.
I don't think so. I don't know for sure though, but more senators came in and finished the job.
Just to make sure.
Can't be too careful. Anyways, let us press on. So, thinking about all these people, what was expected from the Roman people was worship of these empires and these people, because they were held to a higher standard. They were appointed by the gods. It was very important for them to be honored during this time. Another important thing too is during the Roman period is that there was an idea of pietas, of piety, of honoring the ancestors, of honoring the traditions that came before us. And the sensibility understood that religion and the state were not separate. It meant that there was no separation of church and state like we have in the United States, which is one of those pillars of our Constitution. But in this empire, it was together, it was commingled. It was important that your politic and your religion were the same thing. Your religion represented what you supported. And so you were called to honor the gods. You were called to honor your ancestors, the ones who have passed down these things to you. And for Rome, they had their own gods. And they had the Greek gods passed on before them. Rome believed that the most important things that have lasted the test of time are good things, but new things are not good things. So if things have lasted a while, Rome thought that was something that was positive for society because it has standed and lasted this long. But new things like maybe Christians who were pretty young during the Roman Empire, that's not really a good thing. It's a new movement. It's an idea of newness and trying something different. And again, you'll see those ideas played out between Roman neighbors and Christians. People did not like that Christians were new.
Christians didn't worship them. That's right.
Correct. And that's political. It's not just that's your religion and that's what you believe. Like we can say that today, right, in the United States. Like that's my belief and what I believe. What you believed was political. And so if you said, I'm not going to worship Caesar, you're making a political statement. And you could be arrested for it. You could be put on trial for it. You could be killed for it. So yeah.
Daniel.
It's yeah. But they were pragmatic people. They tried to work as well as they could to get the money and peace that they wanted. If we look at some of the writings of Tacitus, who was an aristocrat during the 50s or not the 50s, he was born in the 50s and kind of went on into the early 2nd century. But when he was writing about Roman Empire and their treatment of Christians, he found that there wasn't a widespread rule against Christians. There was not a rule that was put up against Christians. There wasn't this widespread persecution of them. But he did say people thought they were weird and were hated for a lot of reasons. He said they ate blood. They ate the blood and body of some guy, so they were cannibals. He said that Christ did sorcery and magic. He said they were incestuous because they greeted each other with a holy kiss. He said they had feasts together, and they were most mischievous, superstitious cult. He also said that Christians are guilty of atheism because they didn't believe in all the other gods of the Roman Empire, so they were atheists. Interesting, right? And that Christians hate humanity because they didn't participate in any of the festivals and the sacrificial festivals. They didn't go to social gatherings. They were very antisocial. The reasons Christians didn't do that is because all those festivals were idolatrous. All those festivals were committed to the Roman gods or to Caesar himself. And so people just thought Christians were wacko, strange, and weird. But also, we look at Pliny the Younger's writings, and he wrote to Emperor Trajan, which came sometime after Domitian. And he wrote a letter as he was ruling over, I don't remember where. He was ruling over a province. He wrote to Trajan and he said, I don't know what to do with these Christians. They are pesky little fellows, and I don't know what the heck to do with them. He's like, do I kill them? Do I put them in jail? What do I do? And so some people look at Pliny the Younger and his letters as proof during the late 1st, early 2nd century that Christian persecution was not a widespread event. It was kind of on a case-by-case basis, place-by-place basis. And so there wasn't this like specific way to deal with Christians. But he kind of got in response, well, give them every chance he can to fall into Roman religion. If they want to proclaim Jesus as Lord, cool. They just need to also proclaim Caesar as Lord as well. They just need to proclaim that the Roman gods are Lord as well. I don't care, if they say this about Jesus, but they need to proclaim the other one as well. And so that kind of became the standard for Pliny here. As he gave Christians every single chance, he'd torture them, he would try and get them, he'd throw them in prison, starve them. He'd say, just, say these other things and you can go. I won't do anything else to you. If you want to just do whatever you want after that, that's fine. But I'm just trying to give you the best opportunity. And so that was kind of the standard, was we'll try and work with these people. That brings us to Ignatius of Antioch. Ignatius was the bishop in Antioch, which is kind of a metropolitan city of the empire in modern day Turkey. And he was a big leader in the church during this time. He was the voice of Christianity in Antioch. He was the leader of the Christian community, and he ended up getting arrested because of his faith. And he refused to worship Roman gods. And so he decided to write letters to a bunch of different churches in Asia Minor, and the letters touch on, his own Christian theology. And he says he's going to the Colosseum, being dragged there to be killed. And he says to the churches to keep the faith, and that his faith will be complete once he's killed for Christ. He says it'll prove his faith if he goes and dies, to be mauled by animals in the Colosseum. So he said, please don't try to break me out. Please don't try and do anything like that. Just let me do this because this is what we need to do. We need to stand up for our faith. And Ignatius would be killed in the Colosseum in the early 2nd century. Yeah. So this is kind of a brief overview, kind of the context of where we're going in Revelation, of some of these ideas of persecution, of the Roman political idea that religion is a part of your politic, of expectation of that. And we'll talk a lot about that in the next few weeks to kind of unpack what that means for us in Revelation. But I know this is a lot of information, and I'm sure I don't remember it all. But it kind of shows us and gives us the landscape of what is happening during this time so that we can better understand why John is writing this letter and why he says certain things that seem just crazy, but it's a reality for him. I'm going to stop at this point. We've got a few minutes. Questions, concerns. This is probably going to be the toughest week, the most information. We should get into more conversations next week.
Do you know what percent were Christians at this time of the, like, what, any idea of what?
In the empire?
Yeah. I mean, is this a really, I guess it's really small.
It's, I would guess less than 1%. It's not a lot of people compared to the entire Roman Empire.
Right.
That makes sense. Yes, John.
Do we kind of know what the population of the Rome area you call? I guess you just call it Italy
Yeah,
for the sake of conversation. What the because he said they had tens of thousands of soldiers. Where did he get all those soldiers from?
Different.
From other countries. Okay. All right.
So when they conquered a place, they would get their soldiers.
Okay.
So when he had conquered a territory, guess what? He got an influx of soldiers. They might not fight the same, but they would fall into line pretty quick. But no, it's a good thought. Yeah, they're not. Yeah.
It really didn't sound like it was a very good time to be living. There was a lot of cruel going on. Seemed like they used this shock and awe tactics to control their citizenry. And it's a lot like that Mel Gibson movie, Apocalypto. I don't know if you've ever watched that.
Yeah.
But that entire movie is nothing but one scene after another of unbelievable shock. And I can't imagine living in a period where I can't go out of the house without fear of saying something wrong, giving somebody the idea that I might be.
Yeah, I think as you get to the closest of that locus of power in Rome and then kind of go out, it gets less and less so iron fist, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I think the farther you get out, the more lax things are, but it's still Roman control, if that makes sense.
How far out are we from the rule of Constantine? Very far out.
3 centuries or so, something like that.
Because it gave Christianity that much time to at least influence this ruler Constantine.
Correct.
To be so much different than the world was before.
Yeah.
It's interesting, but you can see where John write these things. He was, living in the caves on the island of Patmos, and just, you wondered, like I said this morning, was he sitting in a sweat lodge smoking peyote when he was writing all this stuff,
So, important point there, Dan. Yes, John was exiled to Patmos because of his faith.
Mm-hmm.
I guess the Roman Empire just didn't like him. It was what he was saying. Sent him there. And he said, I was on Patmos. So when he's writing Revelation, it's after he's been exiled. So he's back somewhere.
So he was lucky he didn't get killed outright.
Yeah. He either compromised his faith or that was just the punishment in the area that he was in, was to be put on an island.
And so he was able to send letters to these 7 churches from the island?
No, he wrote the letters after his time on Patmos. Because it says in the letter,
he came back.
I was on Patmos.
Oh, okay.
It doesn't say I am on Patmos.
And that's where he had the visions? Or
I don't know, maybe. Or maybe when he came back, I don't know. Maybe he came back and he was like, we need to do something. We need to do something about this, But going back to Dan, what you were saying, we'll read in the 3rd week about the beast of the sea. And people will look at that beast and say, who can stop such a beast? Who can stand against this beast? And like you were saying, to live during that time, it probably felt helpless being under the Roman Empire, that you didn't have control over your life, really. You had to conform in some way to be part of that Pax Romana. And so we'll unpack that. Rome is a beast.
Yeah.
Thanks, y'all. I really appreciate it.
Should we
Thank you.
read anything